In this video, I'll be running through how to structure performance max asset groups for e-commerce brands. Rather than diving into a particular structure that you should be running, I'm going to give you the framework or the principles that you can reason from to decide which asset group structure you should use for your particular e-commerce business. So the first principle to understand is data segmentation. The reason why this is important is because of how the machine learning mechanisms work within Google Ads. And so to give a really brief summary, and we already have a 10-minute video on Google Ads machine learning, so go and search for that with BlueSense and you'll be able to find the video. But how it works is that you have data stored at the account level. You then have data stored at the campaign level. You then have data stored at the ad group or the asset group level. And so let's just call this ad group level for now. And then you have data stored all the way down at the ad level. And this same hierarchy or data structure exists in all digital advertising platforms. So this also translates into Meta ads, TikTok, Pinterest, etc. They all use this structure and they all hold data at each of these levels. Now, the reason why that occurs, to give a really quick synopsis, is because if you go and set up a campaign with an ad group with an ad and it goes and starts serving to people, you want this ad to learn independent of the ad group, independent of the campaign, and independent of the account data. And the reason why you want that is you might be a brand that has just sold water bottles for the last 5 years. And then today you've launched a new product, which is adjacent. And so instead of selling drink bottles, you might be selling home Tupperwares. Now, if the ad account was using all of its historical account data and campaign data, it might go and just go after the exact same psychographic data points of the consumers that you've been targeting historically with those drink bottles. The same thing's going to apply with, for example, search term placements. Like if it just went and placed on high intent search terms that have worked historically, it's going to place on the wrong product. And so the ad needs to be able to learn independently and go, oh, this is actually a different product that resonates with different people. We're going to change the targeting here. This also needs to kind of apply at the ad group level. You're probably not going to bundle all of your, in fact, it's impossible to have all your products in the one ad, particularly within shopping, for example. Only one shopping ad can exist per product. And so you're going to have some kind of bundling at the ad group level. And then you're going to have some kind of bundling probably at the campaign level. And so because of this, you need layers of segmentation, but you also want contribution from these higher up levels within the structure, right? You don't want this just completely starting from scratch. You don't want to launch a new product and you have no data advantage from running this account and spending millions over the last few years. You want some of this data pushing in. And so there's weighting mechanisms at all of these levels that are pushing data into the decision-making framework. Exactly what those percentages are, no one knows. I believe it would change account to account and dependent on the individual data set. But we could make some broad assumptions just to push the point home that maybe the account has 10% to do with the bid at the user level, maybe the campaign data has 20%, maybe the ad group has 10%, and then the ad has 50% of the data is used within the decision-making framework for the bid on placement. And this is a bid on Meta, this is a bid on Google, doesn't matter, it applies to all of these. Why I've gone down that 3-minute rant to explain this concept is because if you segment out asset groups, number one, you're going to have less data accumulating within each asset group, which is generally going to mean worse performance. The more conversion data you can trigger within an ad group, within a campaign, the better performance you typically have because you have larger data sets for the machine learning algorithms to draw correlation between similarities between users. And so if you go in, for example, let's say you have 10 products and you go and launch 10 different asset groups, probably not a great idea. Because you're going to now, let's say you have $1,000 a day budget, that's going to be split across all of those different asset groups. Maybe you have $100 cost per conversions. So you're going to have one conversion per asset group over time. It's just not enough data daily to be able to really reap the rewards of the machine learning algorithms and conversion data accumulation. Comparatively, if you had 10 products and you put it in just one asset group, it might actually disadvantage you a little bit because you're not giving that segmentation and the ability for the targeting to diverge slightly. And so you want to always, with everything, find some kind of middle ground that makes sense. You don't want to go and hyper segment where every single product has its own asset group, but you also don't want to consolidate too aggressively to where you might have some disadvantages in not segmenting the data. That then leads into principle number 2, which is, what is the purpose of having different asset groups? There's 2 purposes. Purpose number 1 is the signals that you put in there, which is essentially your guiding targeting. It's not like putting interest targeting in within Meta, because in Meta it restricts to just that interest. In Performance Maxes, a signal is just a direction that it should go in. And so it will use it and will target those kinds of people, but it's kind of just using signals as lookalike audiences. That's number 1. And then number 2 is the actual assets. And so if you had one asset group that had all your products, you would have to put all of your product images, you would have to put all of your titles. It would be a very broad ad altogether. But if you segmented them out, you could have one asset group that just has all of your drink bottle imagery, all of your drink bottle landing pages, all of your drink bottle headlines and descriptions and value propositions. And then your new product has all of those images and all of those products and all of that imagery. And you can allocate different signals to each one to say, hey, for this product, don't go after people that are in market for drink bottles. Instead, go after people that are in market for Tupperware or whatever it might be. And so this is a second core advantage, and the reason why this structure even exists within the Performance Max campaign type. And that's what you always got to ask yourself. Why do they even let you have asset groups? Why isn't there just one? Well, it's because they want you to take advantage of having different assets dependent on a particular product, and to provide better manual input for signals at a product level. And so with that in consideration, you also want to be thinking about how different are the products, and do we need to segment them for the sake of having different assets shown within display and YouTube retargeting? If you sell pretty much similar products and you just have a high variation of SKUs, I'll give you an example. If you're a clothing brand, you probably can run a relatively consolidated structure, and I would just segment based on product type. And so I would have a asset group for tops. I would have an asset group for like pants. Have an asset group for, and this is where questions start to arise. So shirts. Do we just put tops and shirts together? Do we need this level of segmentation? And that's the question you have to ask yourself, and that's where you come back to these 2 underlying principles of, well, okay, number 1, how much volume do we do through tops? How much volume do we do through shirts? If we don't do a lot, and these aren't hero categories for us, we probably should consolidate, because that means we're not going to have much conversion data, and those asset groups are really going to suffer. And so if these aren't doing a lot of volume, let's consolidate them and keep them together. Now, let's say these both are doing massive amounts of volume individually, and these are the 2 hero categories. Well, we can probably segment them and there won't be any data disadvantage, because they're both going to accumulate tons of data anyway. And so that's fine. And then the segmentation will allow us to have slightly different signals and slightly different assets, which is probably going to be marginally beneficial. Okay, so let's actually segment them out. And so that's really the framework that you want to be using for deciding how you're going to structure these asset groups. One last point that I'll leave you on that's going to be a big piece of the puzzle here, and arguably you could call this the third decision-making piece, is budget. So if you don't have a lot of budget and you want to run 6 or 7 asset groups, let's say you have $100 a day in budget and let's say you're running 10 asset groups, so you're putting $10 into each of these asset groups, right? It's not enough spend to accumulate enough conversions to really take benefit of the machine learning models within Google Ad placement. It just isn't. Like, if you have, let's say, a $40, and my writing's really going downhill here, a $40 CPA, this means that each asset group will turn over a conversion every 4 days, which means across the months, you're going to turn over about, call it like 7 conversions. It's just nowhere near enough to get, number 1, statistical relevancy on data insights just for a performance marketer, but number 2, for the campaigns to optimize correctly. And so as a general rule, you want to constrain yourself to 1 asset group per $50 of daily spend. And so if you only have $50 of daily spend right now, only run 1 asset group. In fact, if you're at that stage, I wouldn't even run Performance Max. I would just run standard shopping, to be completely honest. But let's say that Performance Max just performs better genuinely on new customer acquisition in your account, which can happen from time to time. only run one asset group. And then as you scale up and you get to $100, $200, $300 a day, at some point, decide on a restructure and then add in more asset groups. What you don't want to do is every time you reach an incremental new $50 in daily spend, layer on another asset group. Because when you make changes at the asset group level, it destroys campaign performance for like a month. So there is a massive disclaimer there that you really want to avoid making structural changes at the asset group level frequently at all. And I would recommend, if you're currently at a $50 a day budget, you're scaling the thing up, you only have one asset group, wait as long as you can possibly wait before you do a restructure. The unfortunate thing is you're probably then going to only do the restructure when performance dips, and then the restructure will cause performance to dip even further, and then you'll have to come out of this lull. So you really want to just be strategical in planning this out across your scaling roadmap for the platform. And so just to recap, the three big underlying principles that you need to take into consideration is, number one, data segmentation within the account structure. Do you have enough data? And AKA, do you have enough budget to support hyper-segmentation? General answer is no. Find somewhere in the middle. The whole purpose of PMax asset groups is signals and assets and being able to segment that at a product or a category level. And so go through all of your categories or collections and do the analysis of, do these products do enough volume? If they don't, they need to consolidate. If they do, we could probably segment them out. And then stick to the rule of $50 in daily budget per asset group that you have within a PMax. We've found that to generally be a good ballpark for having enough conversion data accumulate within an account.